I have cancer, but my boyfriend doesn't know. He once gave up the university of his dreams for me. And once, at the scene of a car accident, he abandoned the injured me and ran toward another woman in panic. I died on the very day he was abroad, setting off fireworks with his female secretary. Chapter 1. The day I learned there was a tumor growing in my brain. Emmanuel proposed to me. My mind was in chaos. For a split second, I suspected that he knew everything. Before 30 seconds had even passed, he stood up from the floor, slipped the ring box back into his pocket, and glanced at me with an indifferent look. My parents' request. If you don't agree, then forget it. The tightness in my chest instantly eased. Of course, he was always fond of joking with me. This time, he probably thought I was using my parents as leverage to pressure him into marriage. That was why he staged this proposal, just to humiliate me. I silently withdrew the hand I had extended and smiled at him. Then what if I do agree? Would you marry me? He met my gaze without saying a word. The answer couldn't have been clearer. Honestly, it hurt. If you don't marry me now, you won't be able to later even if you want to, I said, forcing down the heat in my eyes. Speaking with feigned indignation, Emmanuel didn't care. He took off his jacket and draped it over the back of the sofa, a faint trace of mockery at the corner of his lips. Are you sure there will even be that day? He always saw things coming, and indeed, I wouldn't live to see that day. Chapter 2. At night, I sat on the edge of the bed, lost in thought. Emmanuel closed his laptop, shut his eyes to ease the soreness, then stood up, lifted the blanket, and lay down. By habit, he turned his back to me, leaving enough space between us to fit a pillow. You can't lie with your sleeping posture. We had been together for 8 years, yet he still couldn't get used to sleeping in the same bed as me. In front of him, I had always been thick-skinned. Even when he didn't want to, I would still sneak closer after he fell asleep, press myself tightly against his back, and wrap my arms around his waist. Even our first time was something I shamelessly begged for. I was 20 then. I vaguely remember that day. It rained heavily. Dense raindrops battered against the window, crackling non-stop. The air was cold and damp. I took off my light jacket and slowly walked toward him, and hugged him. He stood there without moving, under a boy's white shirt. His waist was so slim, so narrow. Unlike me, his body temperature was high. I trembled all over in shame, thinking that if he rejected me, I might as well die. I tilted my head up and tried my hardest to smile at him, but tears blurred my vision. Back then, I was terrified of hearing words like shameless, disgusting, pathetic come out of his mouth. After all, I was still just a young girl, reckless enough to act without thinking, but lacking the ability to bear the consequences. He looked at me coldly, as if he might push me away the next second. My hands shook as I undid his buttons, my legs trembling so badly I could barely stand. What are you doing? He asked. I stammered, unable to say a word. He lowered his head and kissed me, the bitterness of tears mixed into the taste. You don't even know how to seduce someone. Stupid. I caught a faint scent of alcohol. His girlfriend had fallen for someone else. He was in a bad mood. I took advantage of the moment and slipped in. From then on, he was stuck with a piece of dogskin plaster he could never shake off. In the darkness, I stared at the faint outline of the ceiling lamp above. Maybe when death is near, the heart becomes calmer instead. The person I once wasted my youth chasing with all my strength. The love I once tore myself apart for, now. None of it seems as important as being able to see the sun tomorrow morning. Chapter 3. When I woke up the next morning, the morning light outside the window spilled across my face, leaving me feeling slightly dazed. The doctor said it was probably because the tumor was pressing on my optic nerve. Now, whenever I look at something, it takes a moment before my vision can focus. Emmanuel was leaning against the headboard, reading a financial magazine. In the past, when we slept in together on weekends, I would cling to him like an octopus, with at least one limb inevitably wrapped around him. It was an unconscious physical reaction. Emmanuel lowered his head. You're awake. I smiled at him. Good morning. He glanced at my shoulder, his tone ambiguous. You slept pretty well behaved last night. I kept smiling. He suddenly frowned. You were talking nonsense in your sleep just now. What were you saying? I touched my face. It was wet. Had I been crying? Afraid he would press further. I sat up halfway and looked at him seriously. I dreamed I went to Norway. I saw snow and the northern lights. I really want to go. Is that okay? I looked at him expectantly, with a hint of pleading. Emmanuel ignored me. No time. I opened my mouth, then slowly smiled. All right then. Maybe my reaction was too calm. He turned his head and studied me for a while before speaking flatly. Next March. Then, I can't make time this year. I nodded. It should still be in time. Chapter 4. What I actually dreamed of was Emmanuel at 12 years old. He wasn't like this before. He used to be a very good person. I was born picky with food, this I didn't like. That I wouldn't eat, and I was afraid of being scolded by adults. So he would eat my leftovers without a single complaint. Unlike after we grew up, when he wouldn't even touch a cup of water I had drunk from. When I was bullied at school, my hair pulled. My notebook scribbled all over. He was always the first to stand up for me. He beat up those annoying boys for me, explained things to the teacher, and gave me his brand new notebooks. I was very introverted as a child, and I came from a single-parent family. Without his protection, I probably would have been bullied terribly. Later, my mom died. I cried so hard I nearly passed out. I said, "No one wants me anymore." He said, "There will always be someone who wants you." I repeated it. He repeated it too. I sat on the floor crying all night. He endured a toothache and comforted me the entire night. The next day, his whole cheek was swollen. After that, I said I liked him. I took off my clothes and threw myself into his arms. His face was cold. He said I was pathetic. Chapter 5. On Monday, Emmanuel's backup phone was left at home. So I went to the company to deliver it to him. On the way, someone called. I glanced at the note on the screen, 11. How intimate. All these years, he had only ever called me by my full name. Serena, Serena. When my mom named me, she probably hoped I would live safely and peacefully. Unfortunately, I was not even 30 yet and had already been diagnosed with brain cancer, betraying her hopes. Come to think of it, my family already had a tumor-prone gene. My mom, my aunt, and my great-grandmother all died of cancer, and all of them were young when they passed. When I arrived at the company, Zoe stopped me, distant yet polite. "The general manager is in a meeting. Please wait a moment." Zoe had been his classmate in college and became his secretary after graduation. All of Emmanuel's big and small matters were handled by her. The two of them spent more time together every day than Emmanuel and I did. What bothered me was that they had dated during college. Although it hadn't lasted long, it was always a thorn in my heart. In the social circle Emmanuel and I shared, everyone thought I was willful and dramatic in front of him, possessive like a guard dog, refusing to let any woman get close to him. But I never dared to even mention firing Zoe. I still remembered vividly how reluctant he had been when he broke up with her. Back then, Emmanuel was utterly dejected. He looked at me coldly with an expression I had never seen before. "Is using my parents to pressure me the only thing you know how to do?" His voice was hoarse. I even thought I saw tears in his eyes. Was he really that in love? That time, I was stunned for a long while. He was always reserved by nature. I had never seen him care so deeply about anyone. The old me might have thrown a tantrum, waiting stubbornly until the meeting ended, then deliberately showing off our affection in front of Zoe. But this time, I handed the backup phone to Zoe and told her to return it to Emmanuel after the meeting. I gave her a slight nod and turned away, leaving on my own. There was a flicker of surprise on Zoe's face. Chapter 6. After Emmanuel's parents retired, they moved back to their quiet old house. I went back to visit them every month, but Emmanuel was never willing to go. "My parents have always liked you more than me," he said casually while reading a contract. "You can go by yourself." My mom got pregnant before marriage. I never knew who my father was. Emmanuel's mother and my mom were best friends. After my mom passed away, it was his parents who raised me. I was deeply grateful to them and always tried my best to behave well. You could even say I was trying to please them. Pleasing auntie, pleasing uncle, pleasing Emmanuel. The strained relationship between Emmanuel and his parents was, to a large extent, because of me. He didn't know that I was the one living under someone else's roof. Back then, His parents opposed him being with Zoe because they discovered that she was being kept by someone at the time. The photographic evidence was shoved right in front of Emmanuel. But he didn't care. Zoe had her reasons. That was what he said. So Auntie, furious at his stubbornness, pointed at me and said, "Rather than letting you run off to those disgraceful women outside, you might as well be with Serena. At least she's a clean, decent girl." Emmanuel smiled faintly. "If you like her so much, then you marry her yourselves." Pulling myself out of the memories, I coaxed him gently. "Let's go together. They'll be happier." Emmanuel's tone didn't change. "As long as you're happy." I compromised. After watching him for a moment, I stood up and picked up my bag. "There's food in the kitchen. Remember to eat." He didn't even look up. "Okay, be careful on the road." It took 3 hours to drive to the old house. I had a sweet mouth. Just a few words were enough to make the elderly couple laugh heartily. I loosened the soil and added fertilizer for Auntie, scattered radish seeds, and set up the trellis for the pea shoots. After sweating all over, I unknowingly fell asleep sprawled on the stone table in the vegetable garden. When I woke up, it was already dusk. Uncle's jacket was draped over me, and my arms were dotted with several mosquito bites. The sunset glowed like fire, carrying a gentle warmth. After dinner, it was time to leave. Auntie asked me to take good care of Emmanuel. I said yes. Uncle said, "You should take good care of yourself too. You look a bit worn out." "Sometimes." It's a single casual sentence of concern that brings tears to the surface. I held back the sting in my nose and smiled. "I won't stay up late next time." On the way back, I realized that I probably wouldn't be able to drive alone anymore. The headaches were coming more and more frequently. Chapter 7. George is my attending physician. He suggested that I be hospitalized for treatment. In the later stages, the headaches might become increasingly frequent, and some people even develop persistent seizures. I shook my head. If it gets to that point, I'd probably have killed myself already. "You know I can't endure suffering." He frowned at me for a while, then finally let out a sigh. I didn't dare drive, so he took me home. On the way, George looked at me through the rearview mirror. "He still doesn't know?" He clearly referred to Emmanuel. I hummed in response. "I haven't figured out how to tell him yet." He fell silent for a moment. "I can't imagine how he'll react." I laughed. "He'll probably be glad that the rest of his life is finally free." The thing Emmanuel regretted most in his life was probably touching me that year in his sophomore year. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been bitten to death by me and his parents, forced to take responsibility for me. George shot me a sideways glance and shook his head. "I lied to him back then. Told him you agreed to be with me after getting drunk, and I just happened to have the clothes you wore the night before draped over my arm." He misunderstood that something had happened between us and was furious. I said he was angry because his parents forced him to break up with Zoe. George clicked his tongue. "Say whatever you want." The sky gradually darkened. As we passed the sports plaza, a group of energetic young people were sweating it out on the basketball court. There was a brief moment of blankness in my eyes. "Stop for a bit," I said to George. "I don't want to go back yet." "Aren't you good at sports?" "I want to watch someone play." "Me?" George hesitated. "I can play table tennis, but I haven't touched basketball in years." After my persistent coaxing, George rolled up his sleeves and reluctantly went onto the court. With his long arms and legs, aside from some initial awkwardness, he didn't drag the team down. When he made a beautiful three-pointer, I couldn't help screaming. George wiped the sweat from his forehead and turned to look at me smugly. Not far away, I saw a familiar figure. He was wearing a dress shirt and suit pants, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, watching the court with an indifferent expression. I knew that on the outer side of his arm, there was a long, vicious scar. He got it in a car accident, saving me. A 20-centimeter wound, a fracture, steel pins. After that, due to nerve damage causing impaired finger movement, he could no longer play the baseball and basketball he once loved. Even holding a cup of water steadily became impossible for him. Chapter 8. That hand had once shielded me from a lethal stone that came flying through a shattered windshield. I felt guilty about it for a very long time. When the game ended, George high-fived his teammates and walked toward me, drenched in sweat. I handed him his jacket. "Let's go." He looked aggrieved. "We won. And not even a sip of water?" I'm the only one who's drunk from it. He reached out his hand. Give it to me. Emmanuel had left at some point without me noticing. I laughed awkwardly. Come on, I'll buy you water. By the time I got home, Emmanuel had already washed up and was lying on the bed in his pajamas. I showered, got into bed, and he turned off the light. We didn't say a single word all night. The next day, an extra person suddenly joined our planned weekend date. The company's planning to do an amusement park project. I brought Zoe along to check out potential locations. Emmanuel explained flatly. I didn't say anything. We walked for a while. Zoe seemed to have caught a cold and kept coughing. Emmanuel frowned. If you're sick, why didn't you say so? Zoe smiled. I've had a cold for days. I thought medicine would take care of it. But the wind made it worse. Emmanuel took off his jacket and handed it to her. Zoe wrapped herself tightly in it. Thank you for your concern, boss. It was overcast. The wind strong and unrelenting, whipping against our faces until they stung. Emmanuel found a cafe, but it was packed at lunchtime. Only seats near the entrance were left. He had her sit against the wall, away from the wind. Maybe it was the cold air pouring in. My head began to throb again. Cold sweat broke out all over me. My legs went weak, and I instinctively grabbed Emmanuel's arm. He lowered his gaze at me. Are you sick too? There was no concern in his tone. If anything, there was a hint of mockery. I forced myself to stand steady and let go of his arm. Didn't really eat breakfast. Probably low blood sugar. He said nothing. I'm going to the restroom, I said. He gave a brief hum. I turned away and took a deep breath. The headache was so bad I could barely think straight. Something warm flowed from my nose. The customers walking toward me looked startled. I had a nosebleed. I quickly covered my mouth and nose, lowered my head, and hurried to the restroom. I locked the stall door and called George to ask what to do. The call rang for a long time without being answered. A wave of nausea surged up, and I bent over the toilet, vomiting until the world spun. The stomach acid burned my throat. After I finished throwing up, the headache eased a little. I leaned against the wall and rested for quite a while. I splashed cold water on my forehead, washed my face, and slipped out through the cafe's side door. When I came back, Zoe was coughing badly, and Emmanuel was gently patting her back. My eyes suddenly felt sore, probably jealousy. I walked over and set Ambroxol and Loquat cough syrup on the table. I asked at the pharmacy. They said this should help with the cough. Zoe took them with some surprise. Thank you, Miss Serena. Emmanuel's attention never left her. He didn't spare me even a glance. You seem not looking too well either? Unexpectedly, it was Zoe who noticed something was wrong with me. Only then did Emmanuel look at me, his gaze assessing. I smiled. My stomach's a bit upset, he said lightly. Let's head back early after we finish the snacks. I nodded. In the car, George returned my call. Sorry, the department head pulled me aside just now. Didn't have my phone. What's wrong? Did something happen? I glanced at Emmanuel in the driver's seat and said softly, just a bit of stomach trouble. Wanted to ask what medicine to take. It's fine now, already better. George was silent for half a second. Then we'll talk when you're back. I couldn't help curling my lips. He had always been that sharp. Emmanuel turned to Zoe. I'll take you to the hospital. Get in 4. Zoe hesitated, then agreed. Emmanuel looked at me through the rearview mirror. What about you? Do you need to go to the hospital for a checkup? I shook my head. Just drop me off. I'll take a cab back. He showed little reaction. Suit yourself. I looked out the window at the passing scenery. Sometimes, I couldn't help wondering if Emmanuel knew I was dying. Would he regret treating me like this? But then I'd snap back to reality. What did it have to do with him? I was the one choosing to keep it from him. A few minutes later, Emmanuel dropped me off at an intersection. Zoe looked at me with a hint of apology. The car drove off quickly. I stood there for a moment, then raised my hand and flagged down a taxi. Chapter 9. I didn't go home. I went to a convenience store, bought a 6-pack of beer, then went down to the riverside and drank with the river breeze. I wasn't trying to punish myself. I only drank half a can. The rest I just held in my hand, because I was afraid of the cold. I also bought a shawl from a roadside clothing shop. George once asked me why I didn't tell my family about my illness. before my mom died. I was the one taking care of her. By the time she was dying, she was emaciated. Her veins had shriveled so badly that needles couldn't even go in. That became the deepest impression I had of her. Every time I think of it, it feels like a dark cloud pressing down on my chest. In the dead of night, the despair and bleakness of watching a loved one tormented by illness never truly goes away. My death doesn't have to be like that. Rather than having them accompany me through meaningless treatments, watching me grow weaker and more undignified little by little, I'd rather they remember me as healthy and beautiful. After that, George can tell them that I left with dignity, that medicine is advanced now. And I didn't suffer much. I stayed by myself for a long time, hugged my knees and dozed for a bit. Before I realized it, it was almost dark. I unlocked my phone, many missed calls. I randomly picked one and called back. Emmanuel sounded angry, as if he wanted to eat me alive. I called you so many times. Why didn't you answer? It took me a moment to come back to my senses. Instinctively, I felt like I'd delayed something important. What's wrong? Did something happen? He was silent for a long time, his breathing heavy, like he was forcing himself to control his emotions. Where are you? I looked around. Lujiang Pier. He said, stay there. Don't move. I'm coming to get you. I wrapped my shawl tighter and obediently waited where I was. Emmanuel arrived faster than I expected. After parking the car, he strode toward me, his eyes quickly scanning me up and down, as if checking for something. Once he confirmed that nothing seemed wrong with me, he finally calmed down. What are you doing here? He asked. I was just about to answer when I sneezed. His expression darkened. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around me. I actually didn't want it, after all. That jacket had been draped over Zoe's shoulders earlier in the day. Faintly, I could still smell Zoe's perfume. Walking behind him, I quietly slipped the jacket off. Emmanuel opened the car door, then suddenly turned around, frowning. What are you doing? I said softly. Zoe wore it. What she wore, I don't want. Call it petty if you like. I'm about to die anyway. There's no need for me to be so sensible anymore, right? Who told you that? He grabbed the jacket and wrapped it back around me. The crease between his brows relaxed. Even if she wore it, you still have to wear it. Is your body not bad enough already? In the car, he turned on the heater. I said, it's hot. He said, serves you right. After that car accident, Emmanuel became extremely cautious when driving. A 5-kilometer stretch took more than 10 minutes. As we entered the apartment, he suddenly grabbed my hand, lowering his head. He caught the scent of alcohol on me. How much did you drink? 1 can. He clearly didn't believe me. I wanted to explain, but as soon as I opened my mouth, I sneezed several times in a row. He placed his palm against my forehead to check my temperature. Do you have a fever? Maybe I'd sneezed too hard. Something flowed out of my nose again. Emmanuel frowned. What's wrong with you? I shook my head and covered my nose. Probably too much internal heat. Blood poured out like a faucet that hadn't been turned off properly. Emmanuel's expression changed instantly. He made me tilt my head back and pinch my nose, then rushed into the bedroom, rummaged around, and stuffed medical cotton balls into my nostrils. He stared at me the entire time, his movements careful and meticulous. The nosebleed gradually stopped. My face and neck were sticky with blood. Emmanuel brought a warm towel and wiped me clean. When he wiped down to my chest, his hand paused slightly. I tugged at his sleeve. There was a coin-sized bloodstain there. I got blood on you. He didn't care. He kept staring at my face, his brows drawing together again. You can get a nosebleed just from sneezing. Are you made of porcelain? I nodded and admitted it generously. I'm just weak. I was telling the truth. He looked me over. Have you lost weight? He still remembered my weight. Emmanuel went to the kitchen and cooked a bowl of fragrant noodles. Then he watched me eat the entire bowl. I hadn't been this full in a long time. My stomach was visibly rounded, so stuffed I couldn't move. He brought over my pajamas, squatted down, and helped me change my shoes. When he lowered his head, the loose strands of hair on his forehead covered his eyes, making him look patient and gentle. For a moment, I thought we had gone back to the past. Back then, because I was picky and malnourished, He refused to indulge me anymore and forcibly corrected my eating habits. Actually, there were many things I wanted to ask him. He scored so well back then, he could clearly have gone to one of the top 5 universities in the country. Why did he stay at our bottom tier 985 instead? At the time, he said it was because it was far from home and his family wouldn't bother him. Was that really the truth? Or was it because he was afraid I'd be all alone, going to school in another city, and get bullied? But in the end, I didn't ask. Emmanuel received a phone call. He stood up, walked aside, his tone and expression unusually gentle. She's been found. Some things are simply destined. If he hadn't come to our university, he wouldn't have met Zoe. Even though Zoe later couldn't withstand the pressure and ended up with another man. After all these years, these two were still of one mind. Emmanuel, I don't have much time left. Walk this last stretch with me, and then you'll finally be free. Chapter 10. In another month, it would be my birthday. Recently, I could clearly feel my body getting worse. The dosage of painkillers kept increasing, yet the pain only grew stronger. George also told me that my condition didn't look optimistic. I clung tightly to Emmanuel, repeatedly nagging in his ear. Take me to see the Northern Lights, okay? Didn't we agree on next year? I can't wait anymore. Do you know what the aurora symbolizes? It represents good fortune. People who see the Northern Lights are said to gain a lifetime of happiness. Emmanuel was worn down by my persistence. Fine. Really? My eyes lit up instantly. I wrapped my arms tightly around his neck and kissed the tip of his nose. Emmanuel froze for a moment, his whole body tensing up. But he didn't push me away. Chapter 11. Our relationship eased up quite a bit. The most obvious sign was that Emmanuel became more fierce. Although our frequency before wasn't exactly low, he had clearly been putting in more effort lately. Setting that aside, I still cherished this period of time. If only there weren't all those tangled emotional complications between men and women. At the very least, he was a competent man. Life is always full of surprises. After enduring for so long, my birthday was finally approaching. That day, I went out to buy some things for our upcoming trip abroad. On the way, a headache struck, and I was hit by an electric scooter. I curled up on the ground, my face deathly pale. The rider was terrified and tried to call an ambulance, but I stopped him and dialed George's number instead. He was supposed to be off today. George arrived quickly. He lifted me up from the ground while I was convulsing in pain, put me into the car, and gave me a sedative. I slowly recovered and even had the mood to joke with him. When I die, I'll definitely leave you half my inheritance. You're more reliable than a boyfriend. In the middle of his busy movements, he spared me a glare. Who wants your inheritance? Then what do you want? I don't really have anything valuable. He thought for a moment. Cook me a meal. To be honest, I chased you back then because your cooking was just too good. Oh, I'd cooked for Emmanuel for so many years, and he still never fell in love with me. We went to the market to buy groceries. With a heart full of gratitude, I decided to show off my skills. George had been leaning lazily against the kitchen door watching me, until I called him in to help. Halfway through cooking, Emmanuel called. What's going on? Someone from the company said they saw you get hit by a vehicle on the road today? I froze. I hadn't expected him to know. It was a small accident, nothing serious. He took a deep breath. Where are you now? George handed me the prepared shrimp. I removed the veins and heads. If I'd known it'd be this troublesome, I would have just bought shrimp meat. Hearing George's voice, Emmanuel fell silent. I had no choice but to say, George helped me. I'm at his place, cooking for him. Then it seems there's nothing wrong, he said in a low voice, and hung up. George and I exchanged a look. He spread his hands. That night, Emmanuel came back very late. I bounced happily up to him, handed him a cup of warmed milk. What date are we going to Norway? I need to book the tickets. Emmanuel lifted his eyes to look at me. He didn't take the milk, and he didn't speak. In that silence, I seemed to sense something. Sure enough, he lowered his gaze. Sorry, there's a tricky project in the UK that our company is taking over. I have to be there in person, from the start of construction to completion. It'll take at least half a year. My fingers unconsciously tightened around the cup. If it were before, Of course I could understand. Work comes first. Career comes first. I understood that. I was willful. Yes. But when it came to serious matters, I had never interfered with him. Could you postpone it a little? I said blankly, even with a hint of pleading. We won't even stay in Norway for that many days. Perhaps surprised by my persistence, he glanced at me. Next year, you can stay as long as you want then. After a long while, I gave a soft mem. But there would be no chance. Perhaps out of some lingering guilt. That night in bed I turned my back to him. Emmanuel wrapped his arms around me from behind, his scattered kisses landing on my neck and shoulders. I didn't respond. He didn't get angry either. He kissed me slowly, even kissing each finger one by one. At first it tickled. Then the force gradually turned fierce. 5 months apart, he seemed determined to make up for all of it. The next morning, he packed some simple luggage. Zoe drove the car to the front yard. Emmanuel said goodbye to me. I'll come back when I have time. After saying that, he was about to leave. I said, aren't you going to hug me? He hesitated for half a second, then leaned closer. Zoe stuck her head out of the car. Boss, it's time to go. Emmanuel paused. Right, he had always kept his distance from me in front of others. He looked at me. Wait for me to come back. Then he turned and walked toward Zoe. I counted out of habit. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 10 steps. He didn't turn back. In the past, I always hoped he would turn around and look at me, even just once. At least it would mean he was reluctant to leave me. But this time, there was no exception either. Chapter 12. I slept for a long time. When I woke up again, it was already past midnight. The night was cool as water. The entire city lay in silence. Emmanuel sent me a message to let me know he was safe, saying he had arrived in the UK. I didn't reply. I couldn't fall asleep anymore, so I sat on the bed hugging my knees. Actually, it was fine. I never wanted him to know about my illness in the first place. Now that he was abroad, he wouldn't know when I died. In a daze, I started thinking about many things from the past. When I was little, my health was poor. I was prone to allergies and had rhinitis. Couldn't stand dust. So whenever it was my turn to do classroom duty, he would come to our class to sweep the floor and wipe the blackboard for me. In winter, when I slipped and fell in the snow, it was him who put gloves on my hands and carried me home on his back. When I caught a cold, my throat hurt so badly I couldn't eat, and there were no adults at home. He cooked porridge, blew on each spoonful to cool it, and fed me bit by bit. And that car accident, if he hadn't stood in front of me, I'd probably already be dead. Every time he treated me badly, it would cancel out with the times he had been good to me before. Day after day, year after year, each thing canceled out, then accumulated again. I still liked him very much, because some memories need countless instances of unkindness to be erased, and many of the good things he did for me could never be erased. Barefoot, I went into Emmanuel's study. He rarely allowed me in there. In a dusty corner of the bookshelf, I found a sketchbook. Right, Emmanuel used to love drawing. Among all kinds of sketches, I flipped to a sentence. I know Serena is pitiful for not having a mom, but I don't like her. The handwriting was childish. It was something Emmanuel had written when he was young. I hesitated. Then I kept turning the pages. After she came to our house, Mom and Dad only had eyes for her. When we rode in the car, because she got carsick, Mom always held her in her arms. The food I like, she doesn't like. So Mom and Dad only make what she likes to eat. When I got sick, no one even noticed. My chest tightened. So after I appeared, Auntie and Uncle had neglected him this much. Back then, he was just a child too. Why should he be generous when an unrelated person suddenly appeared and took away his parents' attention and love? The diary entries gradually became more frequent. She picked up a rain-soaked kitten. It didn't survive. She cried so hard she kept hiccuping. I hugged her, and she immediately clung to me. Her tears and snot rubbed all over me. Dirty. Mom and Dad forgot my birthday. But she didn't. She even went around the whole class telling everyone. So the teacher and the entire class sang me a birthday song. I didn't lift my head the entire time. It was too embarrassing. I told her not to call me Big Brother, but she wouldn't listen. I'm not her brother. Does being her brother mean I have to give in to her about everything? That's what my parents said. Does she call every guy big brother? Most of the sketchbook was filled with drawings. Only when something important happened would he write an entry. Today I heard her talking to the kitten's grave, saying, "If I don't try to please him, I'm afraid Uncle and Auntie will send me away." At that moment, I felt kind of sad. My eyes stung. When I was little, I really wanted Uncle and Auntie, and him, to be my family. My feelings for Emmanuel were tangled up with that obsession. I wanted a home too badly, but that doesn't mean I didn't truly love him. After Emmanuel became an adult, he rarely kept a diary anymore. On the very last page, there was only one sentence. "She seems to think I was drunk." Idiot. Men can't do anything when they're drunk. The pages were old and stuck together. I tore open the second to last page and found another entry. "Zoe is quite like me. I find many similarities in her. Even the stains on the sole are the same. Maybe I can let her be my girlfriend." I froze for a moment. So in the end, he realized that Zoe was his soulmate. So it turned out that the childhood I remembered wasn't the same as his. So it turned out that I had hindered him in so many ways. I picked up a pen and wrote a few words on the back of the sketchbook. "I'm sorry." Chapter 13. The headache flared up again. When it hit, my whole body hurt. Had the painkillers stopped working? I looked at myself in the mirror. Honestly, I didn't look very good. The baby fat was completely gone now. Emmanuel didn't like the cute little sister type. Maybe he'd like how I looked now. You could even say I looked like his aunt. Trembling under the torment of pain, my mind growing hazy, I couldn't help wanting to call Emmanuel. My fingers hovered over his number. In the end, I didn't press it. I'm a very selfish person, with a lot of dark, petty thoughts. I knew perfectly well that Emmanuel didn't like me, yet I still forced him to be with me, using responsibility as leverage. This time, I'll let it go. Chapter 14. On my birthday, Emmanuel called me many times. I watched the screen light up, then go dark. In the end, I answered. "Why did it take you so long to pick up?" His side was noisy. I fell asleep. I said softly, "Did you eat cake?" He asked. I nodded. I did. "Did my parents spend it with you?" How could I let Auntie and Uncle see me like this? So I lied to them, saying I'd gone traveling, wanted to see another side of the world, and that I wouldn't be back for a long time. "No," I said with a smile. "I spent it with friends." He was silent for a second. "George?" He really was the closest friend I'd kept in touch with all these years. "Yeah, he bought the cake. What's annoying is he even bought one a year too old. And he kept telling me that since I'm born later in the year, 1 year counts as another. He's so irritating." In reality, I hadn't seen him in quite a while. Emmanuel gave a low "Lately my stomach hurts all the time. And my heart hurts too. It hurts so much I roll around on the floor." I tried to act spoiled, but my voice was hoarse, so the effect wasn't great. "Can you come back soon? I want to see you." Have you heard the story of the boy who cried wolf? Before, when Emmanuel had to go on business trips with Zoe, I wanted to go along. If he refused, I'd threaten suicide, sending messages the night before they left, saying that if he didn't take me, I wouldn't live. I was just speaking out of anger, but I never thought he'd really believe it. Emmanuel rushed over in a panic. I sat cross-legged on the floor, holding a blunt table knife, pressing it against my wrist. The anxious look on his face instantly turned cold. After that, whenever I complained about being unwell, Emmanuel would grow impatient. The more I begged him to come back, the less likely he was to. I knew this very well. Sure enough, on the other end, he coldly threw out a "wait until the work is done" and hung up. How should I put it? Getting him to like me was never easy. I'd spent 20 years and still failed. But making him hate me? That, I knew exactly how to do. That way, when he learns of my death, maybe he'll feel a little less pain. If he'll feel any pain for me at all. Chapter 15. 1 month later, I was at a quiet bar listening to music. At the table next to me sat several of Emmanuel's friends, men and women. I was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, dressed all in black, curled up in a corner, so they didn't recognize me. From their gossip, I heard my own name. So Emmanuel, apparently, wanted to break up with me. He said it had dragged on for too long. Both he and I were tired. Both of us were fed up. I thought about it for a while, then started packing up the things at home. Clothes, shoes, toothbrush, cups, and those so-called tacky decorative trinkets I had insisted on bringing in. Big and small, everything that belonged to me. I gathered it all up. That way, when his new girlfriend moved in, she wouldn't argue with him over seeing things I'd left behind. I packed all that clutter up. Most of it I dragged to the trash station. Some of it I sold secondhand. Among those things were the wedding photos we once took. We'd taken them on a whim during a family trip abroad. Auntie and uncle had a copy too. Back then, I treasured them dearly, hanging them in the most eye-catching spot in the house. But those couldn't be sold secondhand, so I could only throw them away. Before leaving, I took one last look around the house. All right, there wasn't a single trace of me left. Oh, wait. I left a brown teddy bear on the living room sofa. I'd bought it because I thought it looked a lot like Emmanuel. I pinned a note to it. Bear is for Zoe. How much did Emmanuel like Zoe? Back then, the three of us were in the same car. I was driving. Emmanuel sat in the passenger seat. Zoe was sitting behind me. When that out-of-control truck crashed into us, Emmanuel blocked the flying debris for me, but the deformed car body trapped me tightly. My legs were stuck under the steering wheel. Shattered glass pierced my thigh. Blood pouring out. Maybe it was the body's self-protection mechanism. At that moment, I felt numb. I didn't even feel the pain. From behind me came Zoe's agonized groans. Emmanuel, despite his fractured arm, got out of the car, opened the door for her, and carried her out. Only after that did he have the energy to tend to me. I don't know when Emmanuel returned to the country, or why no one told me. When I saw him getting out of a taxi at the entrance of the residential compound, my face went pale. I panicked, not knowing what to do. All I could think was, I can't let him see me like this. As if sensing my gaze, he turned his head and looked in my direction. I turned away and hurried my steps. A little flustered, I rented a small place nearby. Only after I got home did I finally let out a breath of relief. Then Emmanuel's call came through. He must have gone back and found that I wasn't there. I steadied myself and answered. Hello? Emmanuel's voice came through, cold and sharp. Where are you? I didn't answer. He asked again, with a hint of pressure. Where are you? My mind was in chaos. I made up an excuse at random. I went traveling. He gave a cold laugh. Traveling? And you move all your stuff out? I thought the place had been robbed. What do you mean by this? I want to live on my own. He took a light breath. When he spoke again, the displeasure in his voice was almost spilling out of the phone. I'll ask you one more time. Where are you? I thought for a moment, tightened my grip on the phone, and said, let's break up. There was silence on the other end. I hung up. 2 nights later, I secretly went back to the old villa. The teddy bear I'd left behind had been thrown out into the yard. It had been rained on, dirty and bedraggled. With his temperament, after being treated like that by me, he definitely wouldn't be able to tolerate it. I touched the bear's ear and took it with me. Holding it was exhausting and ridiculous. Even stuffing it into the back seat of a taxi took some effort. I was still a little selfish. I hoped that he and Zoe might occasionally remember me in the future. And at the same time, I hoped he wouldn't take me too seriously. Tell me, if I died, if Emmanuel could no longer eat the food I cooked, couldn't hear my voice, no longer had me hovering around him every day annoying him, would he miss me? Chapter 16. I've lost a lot of weight. It feels like I'm not far from the most undignified stage George once talked about. Euthanasia isn't legal here. That makes me rather frustrated. And I don't want to go all the way to Switzerland, a place completely unfamiliar to me. Given my current physical condition, I wouldn't even be able to endure that kind of travel and exhaustion. George said that if I really wanted to go, he could take me. When he said it, there was reluctance in his eyes. I tilted my head and looked at him. Wouldn't that be too cruel for you? Sending me away with his own hands, he'd probably have nightmares for the rest of his life. After thinking for a long time, I decided to jump into the sea. Rivers, lakes, oceans, out of all of them, Emmanuel dislikes the sea the most. He likes winding streams, likes broad rivers, likes quiet, gentle lakes. But he doesn't like the sea, with its mystery and vastness. He's a very boring person. This is good too. I'll die in a place he doesn't like, it'll save him trouble. So that when he thinks of me in the future, I won't ruin the scenery. Even though George refused, I still left half of my estate to him in my will, whether as a friend or as a doctor. He's been far too considerate, and I have nothing worthy to give in return. To be honest, I don't have much money either. I originally wanted to record a video for Uncle and Auntie, but after thinking about how I look now, I gave up and only wrote a letter of thanks. I've wanted to call them Dad and Mom since I was little, so I addressed them that way in the letter. I hope they won't mind. The sea wind came in waves, howling harshly in my ears. On my social feed, I saw the pictures Emmanuel posted. He and Zoe were watching fireworks. I remember Zoe once said that what she missed most was the fireworks of her childhood. They carried the purest and most beautiful wishes. Fireworks of all shapes bloomed in the night sky, dazzling and brilliant, bursting into specks of radiant starlight, then falling like a meteor shower, drifting down bit by bit. They looked exactly like life at its most vigorous. I placed my phone on a rock and leapt into the sea. Chapter 17, Extra, George. When I informed Emmanuel of the death of his girlfriend, Serena, he frowned and didn't believe me. Don't joke about this, sir. I'm not joking, I said, handing him Serena's will. This is what she left for your parents. Please pass it on to them. He didn't take it. He didn't even lower his head to glance at it. What is she making a fuss about now? I laughed quietly to myself. Sir, Serena's body has already been found by the police. You can go to the morgue to confirm whether it's her. After saying that, I turned around and left. I didn't look at his expression. 7 days after Serena's death, Emmanuel returned from abroad. His parents couldn't get in touch with Serena and reported her missing. The police followed the leads and found me. I told them everything that had happened. At the same time, I received an email Serena had scheduled to send. She said she had left, told me not to miss her too much, then gave me the password to her rental apartment and asked me to help deliver her will to Uncle and Auntie. She said she had written me a very detailed cookbook if I ever missed the food she cooked. I could learn to make it myself. There were pickled chili peppers and kimchi she'd made in the fridge, enough to last me a long time. She hadn't contacted me for so long, I'd already had a bad feeling. She died on such an ordinary day. She didn't tell anyone, including me. I studied at a medical university because the egg and bean sprout fried pancake at her school cafeteria was especially good. I went there every noon to order one, sitting alone and eating slowly. I've always been picky with food. After a while, she noticed me and would look over in my direction every time. Later, her bicycle broke down. I happened to pass by and helped her fix it. And that's how we met. She probably thought my family was very poor, so poor that I only ate one meal a day, and always the same fried pancake. So every time, she would deliberately order 2 servings of meat, then pretend she couldn't finish them and ask me to help her out. I enjoyed watching her performance and played along for a long time, until later, when she started bringing a huge bag of fruit, snacks, and daily necessities every week, saying the girls in her dorm wanted to lose weight and asked her to help them eat everything. I couldn't take it anymore, so I deliberately wore designer clothes and carried a Prada triangle bag to meet her. Girls should recognize that brand, right? She looked at me carefully in surprise, pointed at my bag, and said, "This looks like that. What was it?" Her expression changed slightly. She probably thought it was a knockoff, but didn't want to hurt my pride, so she held back and praised me anyway. "It's pretty nice." I wanted to laugh even more. She was always like this, even in death. She insisted on leaving half her estate to me. When I saw that string of numbers appear in my bank account, I couldn't help laughing. I laughed and laughed, then collapsed onto the floor, covering my eyes that had grown damp. Emmanuel must have gone to the morgue to confirm it. When he came out, his fists were clenched tightly, his expression dazed. I'm a doctor. I know what a body looks like after being soaked in water. It would probably be something he'd never forget for the rest of his life. The police handed him the phone they'd found on the rock. There was still some battery left, The lock screen password was easy to guess. It was the day the kitten she'd raised as a child died. Just like many of her other passwords were her mother's birthday. This girl, she was devoted in a way that was hard to understand. Maybe because her mother passed away early. She once told me that you should cherish every family member. That kitten was her family. She also said that I was her family too. Idiot. After the screen lit up, what came into view was Emmanuel's WeChat post. He and Zoe were watching fireworks in the UK, the images overflowing with romance and beauty. That was the last thing she saw before she died. What kind of mood was she in at that moment? Emmanuel's face went deathly pale. A few days later, Emmanuel suddenly came to find me. He asked when she had discovered she was sick. I said, "The day you proposed to her." Emmanuel's eyelids trembled. The day I proposed? Yes. I leaned back in my chair, looking at him probing. But what did you say again? That you didn't actually want to marry her. It was just your parents' request. He seemed to understand something all at once. His eyes instantly reddened. No wonder. No wonder what? I sneered. No wonder she was so heartbroken back then? It was obvious that his mental state hadn't been good lately. He had lost a lot of weight. His voice choking slightly, carrying a trace of pleading, as if desperately hoping to hear a denial. During the last part of her life, was she in a lot of pain? I maintained my usual smile. Sir, she had brain cancer. Late-stage brain cancer patients experience severe headaches and dizziness, often accompanied by frequent nausea and vomiting. Sometimes she couldn't see clearly. Living alone, she often fell after the cancer metastasized. She couldn't even describe where it hurt. Because her entire body was in pain, she couldn't take it anymore. That's why she chose suicide. She asked me to tell you that when she left. She didn't suffer much. I looked at him cruelly, but I couldn't bear to let you stay completely in the dark. Emmanuel, what were you doing at that time? Watching fireworks with Zoe? Oh, right. I added casually. Once, when the three of you went out together, she had a headache attack in a shop and started bleeding from her nose in public, so she hid in the restroom and endured it until she felt a bit better before coming back out to see you. She called me at the time, but I didn't pick up. Emmanuel suddenly looked up at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. I smiled. But compared to her, you were clearly more worried about Miss Zoe's cold. Emmanuel's face turned ashen. He stood there for a long time, unable to recover. A nurse gently knocked on the door. Dr. George, a patient's family is looking for you. I walked past him and went out. Outside the door stood Emmanuel's parents. His mother's eyes were swollen red from crying. She had to lean on his father just to stand. You're Serena's attending physician, and also her friend. Can you tell us, was Serena really diagnosed with cancer? His mother reached out toward me, her voice trembling. Why didn't she tell us anything at all? I quickly supported her arm. Auntie, please accept my condolences. During her last days, no one accompanied her. No one took care of her. She endured everything alone. How heartbroken she must have been. His mother said, tears streaming down again. I took out the words I had prepared in advance. Auntie, please don't be too sad. Medical treatment is very advanced now. Serena didn't suffer much. She just didn't want to spend her final days relying on medication and machines to stay alive. So she chose to jump into the sea. She really liked the ocean. To her, it was a kind of release. She didn't want you to be sad for her, which is why she didn't tell you. His father stood there blankly, eyes bloodshot, choking back sobs. Is that so? I nodded. She said she wanted the version of her that stayed in your memories to be the beautiful, healthy one, his mother murmured. Even at the end, she was still worrying about my high blood pressure, telling me to take my medicine on time, to get regular checkups, saying she'd ask her uncle to keep an eye on me and make sure I didn't drink. Even on the day she left, my Serena called to check on me. She collapsed onto a chair in the hospital corridor, covering her face as she cried. I didn't notice anything wrong at all. Emmanuel stood off to the side. He knew the truth, and that was exactly why the pain was unbearable. Just like me. Extra, Emmanuel. Chapter 1. The first month after Serena died. Sometimes, I often forget this fact. Waking up in the familiar bed in the morning, I instinctively turn my head to the side, wanting to push her legs off me, but my hand grasps nothing. Beside me is empty. She's gone, and she will never be here again. I stare blankly for a long time, and then suddenly remember that in the last days of her life, she rarely clung to me like that anymore. A week later, I gradually regain my composure. I give up the project in the UK. My parents are devastated by Serena's death, and I need to stay in the country to take care of them, commuting every day between the company and my parents' home. The house I shared with Serena is locked up by me and listed for sale through an agent. There's actually nothing to run from. The house was cleaned spotlessly by her. Nothing related to her was left behind. Oh, she left behind a stupid bear. There was also a note on it, saying it was for Zoe. I remember she once said I looked a lot like this bear. I think sarcastically, what? Is she giving me to Zoe? With a nameless irritation rising in me, I casually toss it into the yard. One day, Mom suddenly says, "Let's go see the place where Serena left." When she mentions Serena, her eyes redden again. I keep dreaming of that sea. Maybe Serena wants to see me. After Mom finishes speaking, both she and Dad look at me. I pick up some food for Mom with my chopsticks. "I can have the driver take you." Mom looks at me. "Aren't you going to see Serena? It's just a stretch of sea. Besides, I've always been afraid of the ocean." Dad nods. "Emmanuel was scared to even go to the aquarium when he was little." "Forget it, let's go ourselves." On TV, there's a broadcast about the breathtaking aurora in Canada, the night sky looking as if it's been infused with ever-changing fluorescent green paint. I avert my gaze, gather the bowls and chopsticks, put them into the sink, and turn on the tap. Mom brings back a seashell from the seaside and places it on the bedside table. Dad says that at the time, she was calling Serena's name, and the shell was carried by the waves to her feet, so they take it as a gift from Serena. Other than that, life goes on as usual. Chapter 2. Zoe coughs once during a meeting. I look up at her. "Get out." Zoe freezes. Everyone in the meeting looks at me in surprise. She hurriedly says sorry, covers her mouth, and leaves the conference room in a rush. I withdraw my gaze and signal for the employee on stage to continue the PPT presentation. Zoe hides in the pantry wiping away tears. I walk over in silence, pour her a cup of coffee, and hand it to her. "Mind your emotions at work." Zoe reaches out to take it and speaks awkwardly. "Thank you, boss." I'm holding my coffee and about to leave when I suddenly hear her say, "I wasn't crying because of what happened in the meeting." Her voice is hoarse. "I just remembered the last time Serena spoke to me. She bought me medicine and told me that taking it would help my cough get better faster. She must have been in pain then too, right? Boss, do you know? That car accident, Serena watched you help me out of the car." Her expression was very sad. The kind of sadness only women understand. I guessed she must have misunderstood. She always thought that after the accident, the first person you wanted to save was me. I freeze for a moment. Back then, Serena's leg was pinned under the steering wheel by the deformed front of the car. Her entire face had gone pale. Zoe was groaning in pain in the back seat. I got out of the car and helped her out first. She was terrified, unconsciously gripping my clothes tightly. I comforted her a couple of times before she snapped out of it and loosened her grip. I asked a bystander to call the police and an ambulance for us. Then I went to check on Serena. She was stuck tightly. I tried to lay the driver's seat back to make space so she could pull her leg out, but the seat adjustment button was broken. All I could do was clear the glass shards embedded in her wound and wait for rescue. She was usually someone who was very afraid of pain. Yet at that moment she didn't make a sound. She just kept staring at my fractured arm, saying she was fine, really fine. But later, when she saw George at the hospital, she cried with red eyes and said it hurt. That was when I understood that, in her heart, I might not have been as trustworthy as George. Zoe says softly, "But I know, you helped me out first because you wanted to lay the seat back and make room for her, right?" I don't answer. That night, I see a push notification on my phone. How painful is it to commit suicide by jumping into the sea? Someone in the comments shares their personal experience. There's regret in the middle. Struggling, but no way back. Utter despair. That feeling of wanting to breathe but inhaling seawater into the lungs instead. The airways burning with pain. I don't finish reading it. From that day on, I start suffering from insomnia night after night. When I can't sleep, I cook, clean, and iron every piece of clothing until it's perfectly smooth. Mom is surprised when she wakes up early and sees a whole table full of dishes. She takes a bite, her eyes turning red. It tastes like Serena's cooking. I put a piece of braised pork into my mouth. The familiar flavor fills my lips and teeth, yet a surge of grief wells up in my chest, as if triggering memories deeply buried in my mind. Before this, I had never cooked. So why am I able to make dishes that taste so similar to hers? I suddenly realize that everything I'm doing now is something Serena once did. Every single one of these things. They were all her habits when she couldn't sleep. Chapter 3. A few days later. The agent tells me that a buyer has taken a liking to the house and asks when I can sign the contract. I return to the villa we used to live in. Without her things, the interior looks hollow and empty. The childish, exaggerated wall murals are gone. The plush toy pillows on the sofa are gone. The green plants she used to keep on the balcony have been moved away, including the wedding photo we took while traveling. All that remains is cold, minimalist furniture. I stand there in a daze, suddenly desperate to find some trace of her having lived here. But there isn't even the slightest bit. Unwilling to give up, I search every corner, yet every corner is empty. What about that bear? I rush frantically to the corner of the yard, but the bear is gone too. It was probably taken away as trash by the cleaners. The last thing she left me, I lost it with my own hands. I go back home and take out the clothes she used to buy for me, spreading them across the bed in all sizes, then lie down on top of them. I don't deliberately try to fall asleep, yet I drift off almost instantly. Vaguely, I feel a very soft breath by my ear, light and intermittent like a kitten's. This sleep feels longer than any I've ever had. The door opens, there are footsteps. I jolt awake, stride out of the room, and head downstairs. The moment I see the person, my chest tightens. It's only the agent. Behind him are clients here to view the house. Seeing me, he looks a little surprised and smiles. Oh, the owner's here too. Perfect. You can all meet each other. I cover my eyes and take a deep breath. I'm sorry, I can't sell the house. I go to find George. I ask him about Serena's last place of residence while she was alive. He studies me quietly for a moment, then smiles. I already bought that house. Don't think about it anymore. My breath catches. He stands up and walks over to me. I know you want to find her belongings. Want to know how she lived during her final days. You don't have that chance anymore. I fall silent for a while, then look up at him. Actually, I'm very jealous of you. Jealous that when it comes to her, you always know more than I do. Jealous that when she was injured or in trouble, the first person she thought of was you, not me. Before you appeared, I was the only one she relied on. George slowly breaks into a smile. Emmanuel, that's because you didn't deserve it. Chapter 4. I return to the villa again, but ever since that day, I can no longer feel her presence. I begin to remember many things. My mother disliked Zoe and was afraid I might end up with a girl like her, so she desperately tried to pair me with Serena. That day, after I had a few drinks with friends and came home, she suddenly entered my room, like a rabbit soaked by the rain, eyes red, clearly understanding nothing, yet still daring to undo my buttons. At that moment, I thought, look, my parents want her to be with me, and so she really came. That night, she must have been terrified. She kept trembling, and later, she kept crying. Later on, I proposed to her. Her expression was complicated: shock, hesitation, doubt, but there was no joy. So I assumed she didn't want to marry me, and so I said that sentence. The sentence that, every time I recall it now, fills my entire body with aching regret. I never expected it to become a prophecy. The next day, I went into the study, wanting to sort out some important things, and saw a thick sketchbook tucked into the corner of a shelf. I opened it. Before Serena came into my life, my childhood was actually very lonely. Most of the time, I lay alone drawing. After she arrived, I treated the sketchbook like a diary. Everything recorded in it was related to her. When I was in college, I flipped through it again and casually added a few more notes. I closed the sketchbook and was about to put it back when I suddenly caught sight of some fresh handwriting on the back. I'm sorry. It was Serena's handwriting. My hand began to tremble. She saw it? Did she commit suicide because she saw this diary? I was raised to be a person who met every standard. So even though I felt that the girl my family adopted had taken away the attention and love that belonged to me, even though I hated her, even though I didn't want her to exist, I still had to play the role of a good man, taking care of her, protecting her. My parents didn't allow me to have a temper, nor did they allow me to be selfish. When I was little, if I merely broke a toy, they would look at me with disappointment. Later, I met Zoe, and I found something familiar in her. She had a mother who favored sons over daughters. Her younger brother had leukemia, and there was no money for treatment, so she willingly became the mistress of a married man, asking him for money to give to her mother so her brother could be treated. Once, I saw her after she finished a phone call with her family. The moment she hung up, disgust flashed across her face, and she softly said, "It would be better if he were dead." She turned and saw me, startled, at a loss for how to explain. Later, her brother really did die. She was freed, and she broke things off with that man, but rumors spread around campus. Photos of her entering hotels with that much older man circulated everywhere. She explained that he was her uncle. No one believed her. A girl with such a bad reputation, if she got even a little close to a man, gossip would immediately follow. This time, I was the male lead of the scandal. At the moment my mother angrily accused me, I suddenly felt exhausted. So exhausted. Completely exhausted. She said she would rather I be with Serena. I laughed. "If you like her so much, then marry her yourselves." My mother slapped me. Serena followed behind me, wanting to speak, yet not daring to. My parents live so far away, how would they know about Zoe and me? I lowered my head and looked at her coldly. "Is this the only way you know how to pressure me, using my parents?" Serena hurriedly explained that it wasn't her. And indeed, it wasn't. It was just a professor at school who happened to know my mother. But I didn't apologize to Serena. At that time, I really didn't want to see her. At some point, there was another man by her side, George from the medical university. I had never seen her show such interest in any man before. Every day at noon, she ate in the cafeteria with him, happily carrying a big bag of snacks to see him. She even asked me while browsing shopping websites, "What brand of razor do you guys usually use?" I glanced at her and asked why she was asking. She stammered, saying she was asking for a roommate, but in reality, I saw her give the razor, along with a bag of fruit, to George. She even touched her own chin while talking to him, telling him to keep himself more refined. At that moment, the shock and anger, even I was surprised by it. Perhaps during those days, my rejection of her, my unwilling care that went against my true feelings, had already been worn down little by little. From the moment she cried and hugged me because of that dead cat, I realized that I didn't actually dislike her that much. She was the only place in that household where I could breathe, but she didn't understand my stubborn pride. She didn't know how stubbornly contradictory an immature little boy could be. Until her death, she believed that I hated her. Until her death, she believed that the one I loved was Zoe. When she wrote those 4 words, what kind of emotions was she feeling? All the pain I had deliberately hidden, all the things I had deliberately avoided, the details of how I hurt and betrayed her, the agony she endured alone from cancer, the terror of approaching death, they all came crashing into me, overwhelming my body. I knelt on the floor, clutching that diary, curling up like a child as I broke down and sobbed. Chapter 5. In the end, I still went to that stretch of sea, the place I had always been afraid to come to. I was afraid of recalling what she looked like when she died. I stand by the shoreline. The fishy, salty sea wind brushes against my face. The blue waves roll in rhythm, bringing with them a nauseating dizziness. Ever since I was swept away by waves at the age of 6 and nearly drowned, I've suffered from severe seasickness, and Serena just happened to die in the sea. The waves lap at my feet, as if guiding me toward a deeper place of return. 1 step, 2 steps. The last thing she saw before she died was a photo of fireworks I had posted on WeChat Moments. I only thought that those gorgeous fireworks resembled the aurora she wanted to see, but I never expected that Zoe would like the post. From that point on, in her heart, it became a symbol of romance between Zoe and me. When the sea level crept closer and closer to me, a phone call jolted me awake. By the time I came back to my senses, the seawater had already reached my waist. I picked up my phone. It was my mom. I answered. covering the microphone to keep her from hearing the wind and the waves. What's wrong? My mom's voice carried a hint of fatigue. I was sleeping when the seashell suddenly fell to the floor and startled me awake. I just suddenly wanted to call you. When are you coming home? What do you want to eat tonight? The seashell? I froze. That's right, she still had the family she loved most, who needed me to take care of them. What's that sound on your end? Are you by the sea? My mom asked suspiciously. No, my voice was hoarse. I'm coming back right away. Chapter 6. A few days later, I receive a phone call. The voice on the other end sounds hesitant. Bro, it's me. There's something I think I need to tell you. We might have run into my sister-in-law before. At a small bar. She was so thin that I didn't dare recognize her. We'd had a bit too much to drink. And suddenly we started talking about you. That kid 11 spilled the drunk things you told him in the UK. He said you told him that being with your wife made you tired, annoyed, and stuff like that. After hearing it, she looked really upset and left pretty quickly. Later, when I heard about her death, I felt awful. I kept thinking about it. And in the end I decided I had to tell you what happened that day. After hanging up, I lower my gaze. So that was the reason she decided to leave. She will never know that the reason I returned to the country that time was to propose to her. I really was tired of things. Tired of standing behind everyone. Eating endless jealousy. Tired of our superficial harmony that masked estrangement. Tired of the way we drained each other. I wanted to ask her whether she was willing to marry me, whether she was willing to go to the UK with me and have our wedding there. But she moved everything out. And then she asked to break up. I always thought she liked George. Her friendship with George had lasted 10 years. If it weren't for her relationship with me, if it weren't for my parents, they probably would have ended up together long ago. So when she asked to break up with me, I naturally assumed that she was leaving me to be with George. Only now do I understand how much disappointment she had accumulated toward me. That time Zoe caught a cold, and I put my coat over her shoulders. It wasn't that I didn't see the dimness in Serena's eyes, I just deliberately ignored it. Because the night before, I had run into her and George at the stadium. George scored a goal on the field, and she cheered excitedly. At that moment, I was jealous. My hand could no longer play basketball because of nerve damage, yet she ran off to watch someone else play. When her legs went weak and she held onto my arm, I even mocked her. When she was little, she often pretended to be sick or uncomfortable to make me give in. But I should have known ever since that time she tricked me with a suicide attempt. She never dared to joke about her health again, even when she was truly ill. She didn't dare tell me. While I was taking care of Zoe, she hid alone, enduring the pain brought on by cancer. George was right. I really didn't deserve her. I don't even have the right to die together with her. She must have hated me. That's why, in the words she left behind, she considered everyone, except me,